Good afternoon, everyone. Conservative estimates drop 20% of grain production in Australia below the 20-year long-term average off a cliff. 17 million tons, but then the government assures it's 19 million or 19.1 million. Anyway, look at these ridiculous changes, 35% drops in different regions across Australia. 2019 worse than 2018, farmers in desperate situation. So much so that Australia is lowering its wheat export forecast now. The world's fourth largest exporters going to import wheat from Canada. Whew, sure glad Canada has a lot of wheat this year. Not. Look how low it is, arrow on the right side. But what's the knock-on effect going to be up into Indonesia, China, Vietnam? I call this a shell game. But more in today's world, it looks like this with the shell of just-in-time delivery masking with the corporate media. Amazing yields! But in the real fields, we get an entirely different look at things. Shoppers in Australia warned to brace for higher food prices. Millers, bread makers as well. You're told it's the first time this has ever happened that it's been this much of a drought or this hot. Ingo Jones taking us back to Murray River, 1915. Wow, how did that drought happen? Unless it's a cycle. 154 years of global warming. Whoa, it's cooler today than it was 100 years ago. Imagine that. Really good analysis from this channel right here, CF Jingara, taking us through what's going to happen, how this stratospheric warming is going to dissipate over the next week, as well as jet stream anomalies right over Australia, and honest analysis on the weather and climate down there and why the crops are being lost. Highly suggested channel. And how prepared are you for food shortages and food price spikes? I myself am still getting ready. And I'm happy that I have access to my Patriot Supply, long-term food storage, 2-week grab-and-go food crate, or the 4-week food supply. And in case there is a disruption in the supply chain, you have something that can store for a long period of time. The links in the description box below. They also have water filtration, Mylar bags, oxygen packs, and everything that you need if you decide you want to go off on your own and start storing your own food to keep it for the future as food prices rise. My Patriot Supply and Adapt 2030. Guardian here with the headline, Australia to import wheat for the first time in 12 years as drought eats into grain production. They show it as a 20% reduction. The entire wheat crop is forecast also to be down 17 million tons. So the numbers I've seen for production are between 17 million tons and 19.1 million tons, the rosy forecast coming out of the Australian government. So it has that 2 million ton range in there somewhere, irregardless what is happening to the agriculture down in Australia. Drought and cold and stressed planting and growing conditions for the crops. Taking a look here at the state production of Australian wheat, just about half Western Australia, the rest of it divided amongst the other states here. In Tasmania, right there at 2%. Tassie, sorry, I'm going to clip you off the map. Bringing it up here, look at Queensland, down 33%. New South Wales, down 32%. And it just rolls on and on. And this is the third year in a row for the losses, yet everybody keeps saying in the corporate media in Australia, it's CO2. Nobody's looking at the grand solar minimum cycle. Well, maybe a couple people are, but they're not in the corporate media end of things. They're independent researchers. But the Australian government coming out with a full-page ad, are you doing it tough due to the drought? If you are, you could be eligible for assistance. I think most farmers are going to take them up on their offer there. And off the weekly price report here, U.S. Wheat Associates, third straight year of drought in Australia. Kevin Long says it's going to be a 7-year drought. I did an interview with him. It's in my playlist. Kevin Long from thelongview.com.au. 4 more years of excessive drought. If they're at this pinch point already after 3 years, they're going to be at zero production after 7 years of drought. And we see it in the numbers. The original 19 million tons forecast has now dropped to 17, but even with that number, Australia's ranking as a world wheat exporter dropping to 7th from 3rd in 2016-17, and it is going to continue. This is a prolonged cycle here. And look how quickly these numbers came down. Back in March, they were saying, oh, Australia's going to export 14.2 million tons, and just late June, they brought that down to 11.7 million tons. Now we're coming further into where they're really starting to get the harvest now, and it's dropping further. So these numbers are all over the place, but it gives you a good gauge of how much the drops really are. And this is kind of the nail in the coffin here. WorldGrain.com, Australia lowers wheat export forecast so greatly. And you have to realize this is in June before the rest of the numbers, some secret numbers we can't find as of today. We still have to use a month or longer ago's numbers, just like in the USDA. They only do it, every 6 weeks to give you an update? Well, at the last update, the drought was causing the world's 4th largest exporter to import wheat from Canada. And I was thinking, I've been reading article after article about how bad the wheat production in Canada is this year. This brings us right up to September 5th. Steep declines in production expected for Canada. Winter wheat last year versus this year, that includes the spring and the white as well. Down 31% or 39% respectively, depending on the provinces in Canada that you're going through. Alberta, the greatest hit. So the wheat production here, I added the arrow on the far right side. That's where 2019 is. Yeah, way down at the bottom of the line. So if somehow Australia thinks they're going to start importing gargantuan amounts of Canadian wheat, sorry, that's not going to happen. So then where will they buy from? And then we start getting into the shell game here, because there's a lot of other countries that rely on Australian imports. So to name a few, the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam. So obviously they're not going to get the wheat from Australia this year. So where are they going to get it? If Canada's not going to be able to supply so much because Australia is going to gobble everything up, Canadian production down, so that gobbles up the rest of what Canada could provide. Now where are these periphery importers going to get? They're going to go to the United States? Well, they're going to have to wait in line. Behind the briefcases and container loads full of $100 bills from China that are going to be gobbling up the rest of the wheat supply in America. So now we're getting into the shell game in earnest here. And if you want to take a look at some numbers, Indonesia, how many millions of metric tons in the top line there that they are importing? Look at that. 3.5 million tons in 2011, but they're not even going to be able to get 2 million tons this year. That's nearly cut in half. So they're going to be on the world market elsewhere looking for 1.5 million to 2 million tons. Then we got China. They're looking everywhere they can. They were having an exclusive with Kazakhstan to buy every single grain of wheat for the next 5 years, cash advance. And we see it, the amount of food available on the planet is a chess game at the moment to acquire it. What about Vietnam? 2.4 million tons, and now we're even under 1 million tons. But that's going to drop further due to the declines this year. So where's Vietnam going to get all this extra wheat from? And I like the very bottom entry there too. So it looks like that's Australian exports to the rest of the world. So back in 2011, 20 million tons approximately. 2018, 11.4 million tons, but that's going to slash even further. So they lost about half of their exports, half of their production, enough to where they're not going to export, they're going to import. And nobody's talking about the grand solar minimum. Really. Government keeps deflecting. It is a shell game. Do you think it's under the left shell? Or do you think it's in the middle shell? You think it's on the right shell? Oh, we don't know. It's in the supply chain somewhere. This is the modern shell game right here. Governments and media can say, hey, we got production over here. Look, it's cargo over here. Oh, there's some imports over there. Exports from that place. The numbers are so jumbled, you can see just the jumbled numbers in Australia. Now do it through all the exporting and producing countries, and what kind of mishmash do you get globally? And another well-educated, independent, tell it as it is, factual researcher, Ingo Jones. Check out his Facebook feed. A plethora of information on what's happening with the farm community down there, as well as cycles. Nothing north of Murray. Harvesters take a hit. And this is in a progression talking about from 2017, 18, and now 19 being lower than the previous couple of years. And it's the third year in a row that this is happening. So harvesters sitting idle. How much reduction in GDP is that? And then the knock-on effect, of course, is skyrocketing prices for flour, anything bakers or types of breads that you're going to be buying, pasta and goods, up and up in the price. They're even talking about how bakeries can safeguard themselves against the impact of these rising prices. And these types of headlines here, drought darkens the outlook for farmers. And in the last line there of the paragraph, he's talking about how bad it is, that it's so bad the farmers' losses this year that they're not going to have to pay taxes for 30 years because they're going to get a write-off on loss that's so steep that they can continue to offset that for 30 more years. There is a severe problem that few are talking about. And it is related to cycles. Grand solar minimum, our sun's going to sleep on its 400-year cycle. It's matching right up with the drought cycle, with the economy cycle, with the reset of society cycle. And somehow, we can't even discuss that. At least ABC Rural's warning shoppers to brace for higher food prices. And again, when those higher food prices kick in, what are these shoppers going to pull out of the rest of the greater spending economy? So you got the farmers taking a hit, they're not going to have extra spending money. You got the shoppers going to take a massive hit, they're not going to have extra money to spend on something. So what are the farmers, the retailers, and the individuals going to start pulling back on spending first? This is a microcosm of what's going to happen to the rest of the world with a massive economic contraction based on rising food prices. And some others covering the Australian debacle in food, drought, and economy, solarminimum.net over there on Facebook, talking about the stratospheric warming event, this sudden event close in here. That dark green are warmer temperatures. You're looking at the extreme cold off to the southeast there, that dark purple and blue. That's where the cold temperatures are. That's why they call it sudden stratospheric warming, because the warm is the green that's right over the pole. That displaces other air pockets, cooler temperatures. That blue that you see is about 75 degrees Celsius below zero. It got knocked off the pole there. But C.F. Gingara, excellent analysis explaining like how this stratospheric warming is going to dissipate over the next week. Also about the Antarctic vortex along with the jet streams flowing in different places. You get a little bit of agriculture in here. Excellent channel. Highly suggest you go over there and take a look. Permaculture, preparing and planning for this grand solar minimum on cycles as well. There are some people speaking truth about what's happening down in Australia. John Clarkson, Kevin Long, Jennifer Morrissey, Joe Nova, Ingo Jones. And if you know any other independent researchers that are giving true information, please leave it in the comment box below. I'll be happy to share that information so we all can get a better gauge on what's happening. It's all about sharing the resources and information. And more out-of-season cold events pervading the continent. Spring chill hits the Cape York Peninsula. Too inconvenient to talk about. Next, Mount Cannibales closes region battles bitter cold snap in spring. Hey, I thought it was the warmest year ever. Thought there was no snow in Australia this year, according to mainstream media. Oh, what about all this Australian snow September 9th? Mount Tricket? Wait a second. Let's talk about heat. Murray River, 1915. Ingo Jones bringing us back on the cycle here. You know, this fire was set intentionally by some kids and it makes national news. There was no lightning strike. Yet here we have extreme drought back in 1915. But the droughts that we have today are all blamed on humans. Couldn't be anything natural. But take a look at the amount of trees. We're blamed because trees are cut, that we're causing the droughts. But wait a second, there was trees. But the 1944 drought was excessive as well. So how is it that there's two droughts when there was little human activity? I guess it's not us. It's a cycle. And I really like the way Ingo Jones comes out here, shows you on the map with the pin, far north Queensland, puts up some temperature charts before when it was warmer on the unadjusted data compared to where we are now. Far right side, you'll see it was warmer in the past. 1915 and 1970s, outback of Queensland. Cape Otway, 154 years of global warming. Remember, left side is further back in time. We get those circles where we can see the heat spikes. We are at the far right, lower than 3 previous heat iterations, stretching back 150 years. Also, taking a look at New South Wales here, pin on the map. Do you see a temperature drop from the last 120 years? I do. And I, as well as many others, believe it's a cycle. We can prepare for it. We know what happened in the past. As long as we understand the danger in front of us, we can start to develop solutions. That's why I wrote this book, Climate Revolution, The Grand Solar Minimum, How to Understand, Prepare, Adapt, and Thrive. And lo and behold, back in 2017, I circled these areas on the map that were going to go offline first when we started to get into the true food shortages on the planet. See Alberta? That's part of the Canadian wheat loss. Saskatchewan as well. Let me see where I circled down in Australia years ago. Oh, wait, the same places that are losing the wheat production right now? Interesting. The link's in the description box below. Hope you got something out of the video. This is just one set of countries that are playing the shell game with our agriculture at the moment. Imagine when it becomes a global shell game. It already is, but in earnest you can see the underpinnings and the workings of how this is going to manifest moving forward. Food shortages and price spikes are just suddenly going to instantly be here, and you say, whoa, what happened? Well, it was all of this taking months to unwind itself until the true shortages hit the store shelves and your country. And I will see you next video.